Welcome back. This will be my first video on the 2024 Chess.com Daily Chess Championship. I've been recording little daily updates as I check the games and make the moves, but I'm going to try to put all those into one video, so this should be the first one. And the reason I'm making this is because I just saw that one of my games ended. I'm not referring to the number of games that timed out, which is pretty normal for daily or correspondence tournaments. But the first game that ended with a decisive result. My opponent resigned, and I've started the game review in the background. Let's go take a look. All right, it looks like I played this one pretty well. I remember early in this one that my opponent put their queen on the same diagonal as their king, and I was able to skewer that or pin it, however you want to say, with my bishop. But I had to give up 2 minor pieces for the queen, so it was, for me anyway, it was in doubt for a little bit. It does say I have 1 miss. I'm going to find out what that was, and we're going to look at my opponent's blunder. My opponent's blunder was on move 5. Okay, I think that's where they put their queen in the wrong place. I played e4, and they responded with the Scandinavian defense. For those 5 or 6 of you that have been with my channel for the whole 2 years, you know that I used to play the Scandinavian defense before I switched exclusively to the Caro-Kann. So from those dozens, if not hundreds of analyses that I ran way back then, I knew that it's my best move to take. My opponent took back with the queen. In Bullet and Blitz, I almost always respond immediately to that with knight to c3, but I've run a bunch of these afterwards, and I know that knight to f3 is supposedly just as good, so that's what I played. This allows them to leave their queen there for a second if they want to, but then I can play knight to c3 on the next turn. My opponent played their best move, which is to pin that knight with the bishop. And it does look like it's my best move to break that pin, and now I'm prepared to castle. Now here, I think my opponent should get this knight out, and then they can also castle, and we're very close to even at that point. They can also take here, and of course I'll take back, then I'll be pointed at their queen. I think then that they would just drop here and check me, and I would probably bring the bishop back. Or maybe I would put my queen up there, and then they would do a queen trade, and then I would be ready to castle, and they'd be ready to castle. But what they did instead was e5. Which was counted as inaccurate, but it worries, right? It's a little worrisome. It looks like in one more move, they're going to have put a lot of pressure on this piece, but it's not really pinned anymore. I now have my bishop defending the knight, I have my pawn defending the knight, and from way back here, I have my queen defending the knight. So probably it's not really pinned. If they push that, I can just move the knight someplace. It is listed as one of my top 3 moves to go ahead and get the other knight out now, which I did. As I said, it's threatening the queen. And this is where they messed up. The engine says they can just move it back 1, or they can do the traditional thing, which is to go to queen to a5. They can drop back here behind this pawn to continue protecting it from there. Notice all 3 of those top 3 moves protect that pawn. They can drop back too, but then they're not protecting the pawn anymore. And it says in that case I would take, then they would take my bishop, and then I would take their bishop, and so on. But of all the possible queen moves that they could make to keep their queen safe for the next turn, they made that one. Now, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have seen this. Maybe last year I wouldn't have seen it, but it happened to me enough that I'm looking for it now. So when I'm looking around this board and I see that the queen and king are on the same diagonal, I see that my knight is guarding that square. Believe it or not, I very briefly was tempted to put my knight there, aiming for this fork, but then I realized I can't fork right now. Their queen is defending that. But then I realized I can go there. And I did think about it, and I thought, well, you know, what if they take here? It doesn't matter, because then I take their queen with check, and then I'll get their bishop. And I looked, trying to find some downside for that. Like, if I do this, can they checkmate me? No, they can't, and they can't move their queen. And that is the only move that takes advantage of the blunder, so I'm glad that I found that. Like I said, a year or more ago, I don't know that I would have found that. It is my opponent's best move, believe it or not, to play a6, according to the engine. I'm pretty sure in that case, I would have just taken the queen, they would have taken back with the knight, then I would have played h3, encouraging this trade over here. My opponent took my knight, which I had wondered about, and I realized this is danger levels. They have to respond to the check, and then my queen's going to be okay. But interestingly enough, I would have been almost as well off if I had just taken that bishop right now with the pawn, because their queen still can't move. But I did check here. Wait, that was inaccurate? Oh my goodness. Oh wow, it's my best move to take that with my queen now. All right, I had no idea. Okay. Well, we learned something. Because their queen can't move, I can just take their bishop for free. The problem with that, I guess, is that it allows them to develop another piece. That's what it says they would do if I took their bishop. They would get another piece out. But this way, they can't get another piece out. Oh, wait, yeah, they can. They can get their knight out. Oh, okay. I see the problem with that. The problem with that is that they save their bishop. Okay. That's why I ended up giving up 2 minor pieces for the queen. Okay. See, I learned something. Even though it's my opponent's blunder and I have complete control of the game from here on out, I did learn something. Their bishop's guarding that square. So if I take their bishop now, all they can do is develop another piece, and then I get their queen, and they take back with the knight or the pawn, and I would have only lost 1 minor piece. Wait, no, I would be up the full queen then, wouldn't I? No, I've lost the knight. Okay. But yeah, I would have lost the knight and then the queen for the bishop, right? Because it says their best move now is a6. They probably would have played knight to f6, maybe. I don't know. And then when I take this and they take back, oh yeah. Yeah, I'm up a queen for one minor piece. Okay. So that was inaccurate to take with the bishop. I had no idea because they can take back. Good job for my opponent for spotting that. It says my best move is d4, queen to e2. Thought if I played queen to e2, they would just do something that defends that pawn, like get this knight out. So I just went ahead and castled because that pawn is kind of sitting there. It looks like it'd be pretty easy for me to put this over, but I'm only up +2 now. That is one of my opponent's better moves to defend that pawn, and it's not one of my top moves. Wait, yeah, it is one of my top moves to put this rook here. My opponent needs to get one of their other knights out. They did, so good job for them. So I think my opponent's hope here was, because they were only down 3 points of material, is just to keep playing and hope that I blundered away up, 3 points of material and then we'd be even, which very well could have happened. However, if I play d4, I know that my queen's behind it. If they take my pawn, I can take it, and then their knight's the one that's pinned. So I played d4. I didn't know, obviously, that it was best, but it was. It is their best move to take it, and my best move to take back. Now here I expected my opponent to castle, because currently the knight is defended by the bishop, so a lot of times if you have a knight or some piece right in front of the king and then you castle, well, suddenly the king isn't defending that piece anymore and I could have just taken it. But right now they have this bishop here defending the knight, so I was expecting them to castle or get the other knight out so they could prepare to castle the other direction, and then they would end up with a rook here pointed at my queen. They did get the other knight out, but for some reason they put it on a6, and it says that's excellent, but it didn't seem great to me. Oh, the engine says I should take here now? Oh, the engine is a lot braver than I am. Okay, I stared at that for a couple of minutes. I see what the engine's thinking. What I was worried about is if I took that pawn, they would move this over and it's protected by the knight. And then once I moved my queen out of the way, they would have a rook and a bishop pointed right here. But I realized just now, after staring at it, the knight's not defending the rook. I could just take it because their knight is pinned by my rook. What would they play? Oh, it says they would castle over here then. Oh, and then I could take this pawn too. Yeah, but then, wouldn't they then bring that other rook over here and I would be kind of running around a little bit? That looks like getting my queen trapped in by a bunch of rooks either way. Bishop to g5 is my next best move. Oh, okay. Putting pressure on the pinned piece, but wouldn't they have just played f6? Oh, it says, but then I would have dropped it back to f4. Well, why go through 2 extra steps and help them push a pawn? I just went to bishop f4 first, but apparently that wasn't as good. Oh, well, the game review thought it was best. Okay. I'm up 3 points of material, a full minor piece, and, if they take every trade is going to benefit me. Almost every trade. That's what I was thinking here. My opponent must have thought that too, and they didn't want to trade. So instead, they went here. I think that's more than an inaccuracy. I think that's a blunder, or at least a mistake, because we're at +2. 2.4 to 5.9, very close to 6. I did see here that they're aiming for this very nice fork, and if some of these other pieces were in different places, it would be a very nice fork. However, I am proud of myself for seeing this tactic. I thought I could take this bishop, which is the only thing defending the knight, and then if they didn't move the knight right then, I would take, right? But if they did move the knight right then, like going for this fork, well, then I have this check, because my bishop would be right there protecting that. And then we'd have to wait and see where their king went, and then I could pick up the knight depending on how that actually turned out. Right? If I go here, if they take with the pawn or something, I just win their knight. So I was pretty proud of myself for seeing that tactic. And it did say that was best, and they should have taken back with the pawn immediately, and then I would have taken their knight. But instead, they went for the fork. That gives me a mating sequence. I didn't know that it was mate in 8 because I can barely find mates in 3 or 4, so I'm not going to see a mate in 8. But I did see that this is how to save my queen and pick up an extra piece. So I did take that. Now, I thought it was better to go to d8 because then I would have to get this queen out of danger. I certainly didn't know it would be mate either way. Mate in 6 if they go to d8, mate in 3 if they go to f8. It says if they went to d8, my best move would be queen to e5. Okay, I guess I see that. I would be lining up for this, and if they took me first, I would, be ready to checkmate pretty quickly here. Plus, and it wouldn't even matter if they took my rook at some point. But they went the worst way, and I knew at the time that had to be worse because now there's a discovery. It says no. My best move is queen to c4, which is here. Okay, lining up for mate. It says if I played queen to c4, they would play bishop to d5, and I would take it, and then they would take my bishop, and that would be mate. Wow, I did not see that. Well, what I saw is that, of course, I am still being forked here, and a way to get out of it is to bring this rook back. That's not one of my top 5 moves. Oh my goodness. My second best is rook to e8. Wait, wouldn't they take it? They would have to take it, wouldn't they? Sorry, the queen to c4 I completely understand that. That one's straightforward. Gets my queen out of the pin, lines up for mate. Okay, what about the second one, rook to e8? They only have one legal move. And then queen to e5 check, that's here. Okay, they only have 2 moves and it's mate in 2 either way. They go to d8, then I check on e7, and then they go to c8, and that's mate. They go to d8 first, same thing. They have to move over and that's mate. Oh, wow. So I had to know to give up the rook here. I would have had a mate in 4 had I given up the rook. It would have been forced, every bit of it. Okay, well, I saw the discovery, so I dropped back here because they're in check. I don't care if they take this bishop because I'm going to take the knight, and now I'm up 8 points of material. They did take my bishop, but instead of taking the knight, I thought I can get a pawn first and then take the knight. So I got the pawn first, and I expected them, well, they can't go there. I expected them to move out of check to g8, and then I would take the knight. And we would still have a game because it's only +7 now. But I mean, that's what I kind of thought it was the whole time. I'm up 6 points of material and I've got them in check. I've got rooks on open files and I'm about to pick up the knight. So I thought it was somewhere between +6 and +8. I had no idea that I missed the mating sequence. But that is the lesson for me here. I only looked for one check, but I should have looked for others. I should have been looking for the mate that I could have just moved my queen over one. Right? If I had played queen to c4, they could have taken my rook, they could have taken my bishop, they could have tried to block pointlessly, and I just would have plowed through here, and that would have been checkmate. Okay, well, I'm glad I did learn something from this game, and it wasn't just my opponent making a mistake. But speaking of my opponent's mistakes, I think everybody can learn from this. We are still in a normal stage of the opening at this point. We're between +1 and -1. All the pieces are on the board. There's just one pawn each missing. If you're in this situation, you're going to be fine. Just do the normal Scandinavian thing, which is queen to a5 or drop it all the way back. You might want to keep an eye on this pawn since I am a little bit threatening it. So that's why I think the computer listed those 3 among the top moves. d6, e6, and a5 were the top moves. I think that's because they all continue protecting this pawn. And then I probably would have castled. That's what the engine says I would have done. And that's probably right. I probably would have castled on my next turn and then tried to get the rook over here to e1. But putting your queen on the same diagonal as your king is almost never a good idea. So if you're considering this, and if you think this is a good idea for some reason, it should automatically alert you. I'm trying to get this in my head as well because, again, I've just recently learned this. It's not always the case that I can immediately punish it, but it's just a bad idea to have it there because at some point I might be able to get a piece, aiming down that diagonal, a minor piece. You don't want to lose your queen for that. The same thing is true for files and ranks. If I have a rook or a queen that can, barrel down through there. But anyway, yeah, that was the big blunder of the day, and I'm glad I spotted it. But I wish I had spotted the mating sequence here instead of playing that discovered check. That was still a good move, and I was still happy with it. But mate in 3, wow. Well, thank you for spending your time here. This tournament seems to be wrapping up quite a bit faster than my last 2 experiences with it because of how many people timed out and how easily this game went. Hopefully I have at least one more game that's interesting enough to do an analysis like this, and then I'll have a wrap up of the whole first round of this tournament. I'll see you in the next one.